Welcome back, everybody. The deadline has come. The Financial Reform Committee is hoping to have finalized this bill by the end of the day for President Obama to bring this weekend's G20 meeting. Joining us right now is Senator Gregg. He's a member of the Banking and Financial Committee. He's also the Financial Institutions Subcommittee there. Senator, there are a lot of concerns that are running through Wall Street this morning based on some changes that were added last night to this bill, specifically one that would make Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac financial institutions that could be wound down, which would mean either asset sales for those institutions, or it could mean that other financial institutions would be taxed to make up for whatever losses are there. Is that your understanding of what's happening right now?
Becky, actually, I think that may be a little off the mark there. The Fannie and Freddie language was extremely benign. We should have done something aggressive on Fannie and Freddie. We didn't. I proposed an amendment in that area. Senator McCain did. We should have brought them on budget at a minimum and made it clear to the American people just how much we owe as a result of Fannie and Freddie being such a disaster for us. There's about a $500 billion obligation there that the American taxpayer is going to have to pick up. But we really haven't put any language in this bill so far that deals with Fannie and Freddie in a substantive way.
Where's this misunderstanding coming from? Is somebody reading things the wrong way or getting incorrect information?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. A lot of us have been pushing to do Fannie and Freddie reform on this bill, and regrettably it hasn't been done. You know, if you look at this bill, it doesn't really address the underlying problems which drove the financial crisis which we had back in 2008 and which caused this very serious recession, which were basically real estate driven, which were a function of underwriting standards and securitization of bad loans. We don't do anything on underwriting standards, and we do almost nothing to correct the problems with Fannie and Freddie in this bill. So those are two big gaping holes in this piece of legislation, which has a lot of stuff in it that we don't really need, such as this consumer agency, which is going to be set up as a massive new politically correct process for promoting an agenda which has basically got very little to do with protecting consumers and a lot to do with social justice or whatever the political agenda is of the director of that agency. Things like that are thrown into the bill. That baggage is thrown on the bill, but the bill has not substantively addressed some of the underlying problems which got us into this mess, primarily in the area of underwriting and in the area of Fannie and Freddie and securitization.
Just to be clear, though, Senator Gregg, this bill does not make Fannie and Freddie be put into a position where they could be wound down through an orderly process?
No.
Okay.
No.
What are the major points that still need to be resolved today in order for this bill to make its way to the president?
Well, the derivatives language is right at the middle of the bill. How we are going to restructure the derivatives language is really critical. This bill, as is presently written, is going to create a massive contraction in credit, I believe, in the financial markets and on Main Street over the next year to year and a half as people try to adjust to the new standards that are put in this bill. And one of the standards that's being talked about here is a derivative structure which really does not allow for robust derivative activity that's safe and sound. We do not need to send derivatives overseas to be undertaken and used by our American companies. We should have the derivatives market here in the United States. But the way this is being brought forward, we're basically going to inevitably drive a large percentage of this market overseas. And in addition, we're not going to do what we should do, which is have a derivatives market which is transparent and which is adequately capitalized. Instead, we're going to have a derivatives market which has been spun off through spinning off these swap desks, and as a result of spinning that off, we're going to have to take a huge amount of new capital to support those swap desks, and that capital, instead of being available for lending, is going to be tied up in the swap desks, and you're going to see a contraction as a result in credit in this country. You know, derivatives, as we all understand, are really the oil and the grease that keeps the credit markets going, and if you put so many limitations on them which are arbitrary and which really don't get to the core issue of making them safe and sound and have them be as transparent as possible and be supported by adequate margins and liquidity, you're going to, in my opinion, do very little that's constructive and a lot that's destructive in the area of credit formation in this country.
The changes you're talking about, though, are not things that could necessarily be tweaked easily. Are there some revisions or some ways to rewrite the existing language that you think would make it better?
Well, there are a lot, but they're not going to happen. This bill is pretty much locked in place. It's going forward. It's a bill which not only has the derivatives problems, it has problems in the area of capital adequacy, the Volcker rule, which is conceptually an excellent idea. Executing that rule is going to cause significant dislocation in the credit markets as banks and financial houses try to adjust to how they're supposed to deal with the Volcker rule. These three actions, the capital activities, the derivatives structure, and the Volcker rule, in my opinion, are going to lead to a very significant contraction in credit in this country as we head into next year and maybe even 2 years down the road. And this is not a good time for our nation to face a arbitrary, bureaucratic-driven credit contraction. We're trying to expand the economy, and as long as you have credit issued in a sound way that's properly underwritten, you should be expanding credit, not contracting credit. But this bill, in my opinion, is going to contract credit. And that's not good for our economy over the next year and a half. And you've got to remember, layered on top of this bill, we're going to get a massive tax increase in capital at the end of this year as a result of this administration's position on cap gains and dividends. You're going to have dividends taxes tripled, and you're going to have cap gains taxes increased by 30%. Those two things combined, the derivatives, the contraction in credit as a result of this financial reform bill, and the massive attack on capital formation through taxation, is going to, in my opinion, cause a macro contraction in the economy that is not healthy at this time.
Senator, our guest host today is William Lauder, who is the executive chairman of Estee Lauder.
Senator, I agree with the last statements you made, and I think there's a big disconnect between what the politics are in D.C. about having to put forward a financial control bill and the impact, the ultimate impact on companies, capital formation, and the stimulation of the economy and employment. How are we going to communicate a message that the consumer, the voter, understands that it's important that credit, which is the fuel for the future growth, future employment, and the future health of our economy, is intimately entwined with what's going to happen now in this bill?
Well, I don't want to be a purveyor of doom, but if I were in your business, I'd be really worried, because you take what this bill is going to do to credit, in my opinion, as I just outlined, is going to contract it. You take the attack on capital formation that's coming from this administration, which really doesn't believe in capital markets or profit, to be very honest with you, and you layer those two issues on the consumer, plus you've got the fact that the primary consumer in this country has always been the baby boom generation. 70 million people. Those 70 million people are in their retirement mode right now, and they've just seen their retirement assets significantly impacted in a negative way, and they're retrenching. They're retrenching. And as a result, they're not going to be aggressive consumers. So the recipe is not good for a robust consumer rebound here, in my opinion. And I think that's what the Fed basically was saying yesterday. It's what the housing numbers are saying to us. And regrettably, if I were in the retail business, I'd be very worried about what next year is going to bring because of the policies of this government.
What do you and your colleagues in both chambers think, your Republican colleagues think about your prospects in November? How would you characterize, in a word, is it probably not giddy, but are they feeling more confident about the prospects at this point?
Well, I think the American people are very much aware of the fact that we're in serious trouble and the government's spending a lot more money than we have and creating a lot of debt that we're passing on to our kids, and they want it to stop. And so I think they're going to vote to send people here who will vote to control spending, and that should work in our favor.
Maybe you should reconsider. I mean, maybe it'll be a good time to be a... But then we have other people that say the Republicans are going to be like a dog that catches the bus, they're not going to know what to do with it if they catch it.
You know, that's an excellent question, Joe. You know, I mean, that really is the question. How do we control this? You know, it is so serious, and there's so much locked in place in the area of spending that unless we're going to have a very aggressive program here in Washington, like they're now pursuing in the United Kingdom, you're not going to be able to catch your tail here. This debt is piling up just too fast. We just passed the 60% threshold where you've got public debt to GDP hitting 60%. That's a tipping point, and we're headed towards 90%, which is insolvency.
All right, Senator, we'll see you again soon,
Okay,
maybe in studio. Thanks. Coming up, the firm.
Always a pleasure.